Okay, so you now know how to output strings and integers, and you should have made your own question with a string response and a question with an integer response. Now we're going to use variables to store this information because it's very helpful in programs to be able to save or store information to use later on. So how do we store information in a computer? Very simple. We use variables. We create a location in the computer's memory that we can easily access by name. For example, what's your name? Well, the answer to that question we're going to store in a variable called name. And it's not going to be an integer variable because it's not a number, it's text. It's a word. So we're going to create a variable called name. Say OK. And now we have this nice little variable. And what type of information is it? It's a string. So we take this variable and we can put it into the code. And we can put it anywhere we want in the code, but it's helpful to put it right before the place in the code where we need it. And what are we going to set name equal to? We're going to set name equal to anything we want, but in this case I'm going to set it to Mr. Odens. So now the variable name contains the information capital M, R, period, space, O-D-E-N-Z, Mr. Odens. So now if I want to output a value, rather than typing in Mr. Odens, I can just drop in the variable name, and when the command looks at that place in the computer's memory, what is it going to find? It's going to find this information, because the variable name now equals Mr. Odens. And let's see what output we get. We should get the exact same output. And sure enough, that's exactly what we get. What's your name? Mr. Odens. What year is it? 2012. Excellent. All right, moving on. If we can do that with strings, we can definitely do that with integers. And so we're now going to create an integer variable for the year. What year is it? 2012. So what should we call this variable? We can call it anything we want. We could call it current year, integer answer. But you want to keep your variables simple. So I'm just going to call it year, or your variable names simple. So I'm going to call it year. And I'm going to drop that into the code. What if I did this here? Year. I'm going to put it underneath integer out, and I'm going to set year to 2012. And then I'm going to set year, or I'm going to drop in the variable into integer out. Now question, if I set the variable year to 2012 after I output the variable year, am I going to see the value 2012? Let's see what happens. What's your name, Mr. Odens? What year is it? 0. Why is it 0? I set it to 2012. Well, computers read instructions in order. And so if you notice, when we output the integer year, it hasn't been set to anything. We've just created it up here. And when you create an integer, it defaults to 0. So make sure that you're reading the program in order. And if you place this assignment statement before integer out, well, when we get to this command, year equals what? Well, we've set year to equal to 2012, so at this point, year is going to be equal to 2012. And we should get the correct output. And voila, there we go. What's your name? Mr. Odens. What year is it? 2012. Now, why is it important to store information? Very simple. Let's say after all this is said and done, let's create another space between questions. We want to summarize all of the information that the computer has collected. So I'm going to say, hello, it's nice to meet you, and then I'm going to leave a space, and I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to output the name that we've programmed. Hello, it's nice to meet you, whatever your name is. And then string out again. Now, that's the end of a sentence, so right after name I want a little period. And then I'll continue my sentence and say, did you know that it is the year, and we'll stop right there. And we will continue to output. Now we want to output a number, so we're going to output an integer. We're going to output whatever year it is. Did you know that it is the year? And it's going to say 2012. And after that, we want to put a little question mark because that is a question. Let's output our data and see what we get. Okay, look at that. What's your name, Mr. Odens? What year is it? 2012. Hello, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Odens. Did you know that it is the year 2012? Great. Now, do you see how helpful it was to save all of this information? And the great thing about this is if you change the values, instead of Mr. Odens, let's say, what's your name? I don't know, Bob. What year is it? It's 2135. Let's output our information. We only changed 2 lines of code, the name and the year. And look what it does. What's your name? Bob. What year is it? 2135. Hello, it's nice to meet you, Bob. Did you know that it is the year 2135? Well, that's kind of cool. The computer seems to be intelligent. It knows who you are and what year it is. Now, let's go back to Mr. Odens in 2012. Mr. Odens, and then 2012. Now, I want to go a step further. Let's start a new line. And I want to say 10 years ago, it was the year, and now, given the information that I have, how would I output the year 10 years ago? Well, that's very simple. I'd create another variable, and I'd say 10 years ago. Integer, because we're dealing with numbers. And we'd say, we would drop that in, and 10 years ago equals whatever year it is now minus 10 years, right? So the current year minus 10. And then I'm going to output the value of 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was the current year minus 10. And then just for the sake of format, I'm going to put a little period. And I'm going to run the program. And let's see what it says. Look at that. What's your name? Mr. Odens. What year is it? 2012. Hello, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Odens. Did you know that it is the year 2012? 10 years ago, it was the year 2002. And sure enough, computers are very good at math. It's not going to make that mistake, and it's right. Now, there's an easier way to accomplish this. Let's see if we can, instead of creating a new variable 10 years ago, let's see if we can put this entire operation right here. And let's see what that does. So let's take that away. And let's take this variable away. And we can put a mathematical expression right into integer out. We can say that we want to output the year, current year, minus 10. And that accomplishes the same thing. And there we go. Now, why would you want to do this instead of the other way? Well, the only reason you'd want to create a new variable is if it's easier for you, you can create as many variables as you want. But if I created the variable 10 years ago, that would allow me, and I stored the value of 10 years ago in the variable, I could use it later on in the program. If I didn't store it, then I'd have to recalculate it later on in the program. So, now you know how to use variables to store important information. I want you to create a variable for the name, create a variable for the year, and I want you to output some type of message where you use the name and the year and some type of mathematical operation on the year to make your own program. Be creative as you want. Be as creative as you can be. And good luck.